We're on.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Michelle Rehill. I am the chairperson of the Northborough Library Board of Trustees, and I officially call this meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. We'll now read the governor's advisory. The open meeting of the Library Board of Trustees is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of June 16th, 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Library Board of Trustees are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows Library Board of Trustees to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. I will now read the list of the board members. Please respond in the affirmative when I call your name for attendance. Mitch Cohen.
Mitch Cohen, I'm here.
Mary Crowley.
Here.
Jim Hogan.
Jim Hogan here.
Jocelyn McElhenney.
Jocelyn McElhenney here.
Beth Samus.
Beth Samus here.
Richard Tucker. Oh, you're mute, Richard. Sorry. You have to unmute.
Richard Tucker here.
Thank you. Better. And Michelle Rehill is here. And we also have with us Library Director Jen Bruno. All right, with the formalities out of the way. First item on the agenda is the approval of the June 14th, 2022 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the meeting minutes? Sorry. If not, can I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I'll make
So
a motion to approve. Oh, all right.
ahead,
Yours
Mitch,
was
you can have
simple
it.
and more direct. Michelle, you can fight over who gets it.
Okay, but who was this?
You can
Who
decide.
was the other? Was it Jocelyn?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. The motion has been moved and seconded. So all those in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, Mitch Cohen,
Mitch Cohen, aye.
Mary Crowley,
Abstain.
Jim Hogan,
Jim Hogan, aye.
Jocelyn McElhenney,
Jocelyn McElhenney, aye.
Beth Samus,
Beth Samus, aye.
Richard Tucker,
Richard Tucker, aye.
and I also say aye. All right, motion carries in the affirmative with one abstention. All righty. Oh, sorry. I messed up my paperwork. Next item, the FY22 appropriations report. I just want to say, Jen, you and the library staff need to take a bow for getting the budget completely expended.
Yay. I don't like to get money back.
No money back if we can help it.
This was honestly the easiest, for whatever reason, it worked out really well this year. We weren't scrambling to spend money, nor did we overspend. So it was just like a well-proportioned spending cycle that I hope continues next year. But last year was a little bit like panicky, I think, with us just making sure that the appropriations requirement for materials was spent and all that kind of stuff. So this year was kind of like, I don't want to say easy because I'll jinx myself, but it worked out really well.
All right. Does anybody have any questions about the?
No, just thank everyone for their input, the staff.
All right. And was there something else? Sorry, I didn't want to move on if If not, we'll move on to the library director's report. I don't know if anybody has any questions about anything included in the report. You want to make any comments? There is included in the report a,
I have a question.
okay, Richard.
Jen, I read everything about this staff position of a temporary library associate that's intended to be hired. And I don't understand why we are now paying our own salaries from money we raise. And especially in light of a year where we're returning $56,000 to the town. I think if there's anything that is the town's responsibility, it's salary. And I'm going to vote against this. If it comes up to a vote, I don't know if it will.
Okay. If I could explain, if this was a permanent position, I believe the expectation would be that the town would find funding for it. Since it is a temporary contract position, it was something that really started with Kristen from the Board of Health and I just discussing how we could really bring the level of programming that people are asking for now with that immediate need. So that's sort of where the idea came from. And because it was only 1 year and the town is not really in the position right now to be adding staff, and that would take, if we wanted to go through the town process, it would probably take until next fiscal year. So we wanted to try to get something going a little bit sooner.
Well, I understand the time constraints you had, but let me just ask another question. I think when I joined the board again a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I learned for the first time that the trustees of the library hadn't reached its level of 2008 funding for ours. When the recession in 2008 hit. I also learned at that time, and I could be wrong about this, but this is my memory, that we were the only department at that time that hadn't reached the 2008 levels. Now we're hiring somebody, and we're told we'll go make a bake sale or something for the money. The cops don't do that for cruisers. I've said that a number of times, and I don't know what to do about the time constraints, because I see that, I believe you're right, that if we wanted to put this on the town with a warrant, we wouldn't get that person right now. But that's my feeling about it. So,
And I think
is it true that, am I correct that we haven't reached our 2008 levels?
I believe that's correct.
I think it's correct also.
And is it true that the
Staffing.
other departments have?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I can get back to you and I can certainly answer that question. But I don't have that information right now.
I appreciate it.
Sure.
If I could add a little to that, I was similarly a little concerned about spending the donated money on salary for I think something that's very important, not just something that's extraneous. Then I remembered that a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic, we started to do, I believe, the exact same thing for Thursday evening hours that the trustees as well as the town had approved a 2 or 3 year, I think it was a 3-year cycle of funding. Eventually it would be funding out of town budget, but for the first couple of years we would be funding it fully, and then gradually less so from our raised money for salary for Thursday evening, for the additional time necessary to fund Thursday evening. I didn't love that idea, although I love the Thursday evening hours. I didn't like the fact that we had to do it that way. I don't love this, but overall, on balance, I'm supportive. I think it's an important initiative. I think it's the kind of initiative that shouldn't wait for a year, given some of the things that are going on. I guess my question for Jen would be, did you explore other sources of funding beyond just this? I'm thinking, use of the ARPA money or anything else. Or is this the only option available?
So we did have a, and I say we, when I say we, Kristen Black from the Board of Health and I, and because this is not strictly a library position, it would be under me, I would be the direct supervisor, but because some of the duties for this outreach person would sort of extend beyond the library with staffing outreach for Be Well and things like that. So we went together and we spoke with John Kader and Becca Meekins. And I think at this point, because the town is still having ARPA discussions, we didn't feel like that was the appropriate route because it's staffing, and there have been maybe other staffing requests or needs that have been brought up in the course of some of those ARPA discussions. So we felt like that was not maybe the best place to ask for funds. So the half that Kristen was able to come up with is through a grant. So the actual cost of the position is a little over 20,000.
Dan, when you had those discussions, did you realize at that time that we'd be returning over $56,000 to the town?
No, I had not
That
seen
pays
it.
for five, $11,000 salary salaries. that we're looking
And I really want to take a deeper look at what we're returning to the town, because I'm not convinced that we are that under on our budgeted staffing hours. That just seems like, because that number is based on, the hourly rate of each employee multiplied by the number of hours that they work. So $56,000 to return seems like an awful lot. So I want to work with Jason Little at the town to make sure that that's an accurate number, because it seems like somebody would have had to take a lot of vacation time, and that was true. So that number may change when we work on the closing of the books. But there is, to your point, that we probably did return some funds, but I don't believe that we would be able to, like, we can kind of play with it with existing employees, but I don't know that we would be able to count on that money to hire a new person, because that amount would need to be fully budgeted as well.
Yeah, that leftover 56,000 eventually gets certified as free cash and then is available for appropriation later. So no department has direct access to that.
But I need to confirm if that number is 100% accurate number. So just to finish sort of answering Mitch's question, we sort of landed on the annual fund as the sort of proposed funding source for this, because when I sent out the letter, I believe it was 5 minutes after I was hired. It was really early on. The letter was, we asked for donations, and that was to support programming. Since that fund was collected, which was, I think, a little over $13,000 just from that 1 year's appeal, we do have an excess of funding sources for speakers and programming related expenses. And yes, we absolutely certainly could spend the annual fund on something different. But I thought, since it was programming related, that the staff member might be an appropriate use of the funds. But I can continue to investigate other options if that's the preference of the board.
My concern is that I've already sort of seen some of the stress related to trying to run all of these additional programs. a lot of the work that goes into it. And considering it's the Be Well program, causing people stress to administer it seems counterproductive. And because when Jim brought this up, my first reaction was, yes, I would like this to happen. I want to see these programs go forward. I don't want to add to the stress level of the staff members at the library. And my first thought was the annual appeal, as you said, was to support programs at the library. So to me, it made sense to use those funds. And especially given that, half of the funds are coming from the Board of Health for the grant that Kristen got. And the fact, again, that these were funds that we got to support programs at the library. And trying to do this through some other way, to me, will only make it take longer, will delay trying to get somebody on board. And I think the sooner that we can move forward with it, the better off we'll be, the better off everyone will be. Not just the library staff, but the people who will get to take advantage of these programs that will be able to start running, more frequently and a little less stressfully.
Michelle, if I could add to the conversation, I'll lead off by saying I am supportive of this proposal. From the position, just to add a little color, in my day job, my role is to award grants to nonprofit organizations for multiple reasons. And because of the way we write our grants, we prefer to fund programmatic support instead of, say, just general operating expenses. When we look at, and I know the rules are different based on organizations, programs can't happen without the people to make them happen. So Michelle, to your point, these programs are coming and they're clearly something that is needed by the town. And writing and sending an appeal to the town asking for support of programming at the library, last year's appeal was successful. This is clearly something people are looking for. And to add a person for 1 year in a part-time capacity to make that happen feels like an appropriate use based on the ask, the fundraising ask. It doesn't feel like a deviation from what we were asking people to support. I think where I would caution and be careful as we move forward is looking at longer term. Again, like the 3-year rolling for Thursday evenings. I think we did something similar when we were doing outreach and book delivery to the town, where it started with funding from the board with the understanding it would be absorbed. I would ask, you and Kristen and the Be Well team, if it looks like this is something that will continue, perhaps halfway through the program, 6 months in, do a check and think, all right, if this is something that's going to continue, I wouldn't advocate for consistently supporting it from annual appeal funds. We don't have time to go down all these other avenues to make this happen. But we have the time now if it looks like it's going to continue.
I agree with you. I wouldn't want to fundraise for someone's salary every year. That would be really super stressful.
Of course. And not appropriate as a town department. This is something that if it's something that's deemed important to the library, it is part of the salary discussion that we would have in a future year.
Yeah, and not to muddy the waters with a discussion about the Thursday hours, but I do think that's something that we should start to reopen that discussion, because the library, we're busy, we could use those hours.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to sort of circle back around to you, Richard. Our attempt to get our Thursday night hours back and get the staffing level up was a negotiation that we made, and was not necessarily my choice for how to go about this, but if it was a way for us to get back those Thursday night hours and get the staffing level up, and doing it with us funding at the beginning and then over 3 years transferring that to our regular budget, I was willing to make that deal. And I think the board at the time was willing to make that deal if it was going to get us back, as you said, back to those 2008 levels in terms of staffing and general library budget. So, and it was, part of it was we were going to pick up part of the cost of the salary, but that meant that the town, our overall municipal budget was going to start putting back the added cost for the facilities, the fuel and utilities and things like that. So there was a piece that the town was allowing us to put back into the budget that way. And again, at the end of the 3 years, we would be back with that position, those positions fully funded within our overall municipal budget. So it's not the way I would always want to do things, but I'll do anything to get it back, restore those hours, get back to where we were.
Yeah, but we won't get back to where we were because we'll be providing the money. That's what's going to happen. We won't have that money for capital improvements that we want, things like that. We're going to be paying salaries. And you can say, oh, we're back to our level. Taking it out of our pockets. The town is responsible for funding this library.
Mhm.
That's my position.
Well, thank you for your comments. All right. This is actually the under new business, but since it's also in your library director's report, do we want to, do we feel that we want to talk about this anymore, or would somebody like to make a proposal regarding this, a motion to approve the use of the annual appeal funds to fund a 12-month part-time position to coordinate the Be Well programs?
Can I just ask what the timeline is, when you would hope for this individual to start, or?
Let me open my calendar. So my hope is if it's approved, we could post it as early as tomorrow.
Oh,
Because
wow.
everything is pretty much ready. Because in order to get the approvals, we had to sort of draft everything. So today is the 12th or 13th. That means we could start interviewing the second week of August and potentially have somebody, an offer made to somebody by the end of August, ready to start. So the target would be, I think September 1 would be the reasonable target for a start date, if not a little sooner.
Yeah, I have another question. We keep, Jen, you keep bringing up Be Well as this is very connected to that. Why not fund this out of Be Well?
I believe one, it's partly Be Well, it's partly library specific. And the intent, from my understanding with the Be Well funding, was for the programs themselves and not for the staffing. Again, I think that the town administration is really trying to avoid using ARPA funds or funneling that money into salary lines, and to just keep that money for the residents for programming. And we can certainly spend $100,000 on programs. So the Be Well part sort of comes in with Kristen's half, and then the other half is library selfishness. To have somebody at the library, representing the library, doing the outreach, the organization, and then making sure that when we book programs, we're mindful of the different rooms and spaces and things like that. Yeah. So it's partly Be Well, and that does come up a lot in this position. But it's not the sole focus.
Right.
So
Jen,
thank you.
Are we making any contributions to the library foundation this year? We started a foundation a few years ago.
Yes, with the Greater Worcester Community Foundation, right? New
Sent it over.
donations are all that,
Are we increasing that?
you would have to, it's complicated. It has to be new funds that are donated to the library that go to that fund. They can't be town, it can't be money that's in a town account. It's not, you're not able to withdraw that fund and put it into the Greater Worcester Community Foundation. So I believe, Michelle, I don't want to speak for you, but the intent with that foundation was to, we need to, well, the board needs to go through and come up with a real gift policy and strategy. And then contributions would be made directly to that account, but it would have to be through new giving, not through any previous funds that had been collected. Is that correct, Michelle?
Yeah,
Yes.
it has to be designated when you receive it for that. But
Yes.
it just seems to me we have that not being funded. We're returning money. And now, we have 60,000 from the annual fund. And, we're going to cut into that. I just think it's a bad precedent we're starting.
Well, the annual fund is generally meant to be used for a specific purpose. So cutting into, it's there for us to spend, for us the library, to spend as needed. We were under a mistaken belief that we were allowed, because our intent with one of the annual appeals was to have money to put into the foundation. We thought that we were doing exactly that, Richard. And when we tried to deal with the transfer of the funds, discovered that because of the way the funds were received in the town and invested by the town, we're not allowed to touch that. We cannot take it from the town, from our investment at the town level, and move it elsewhere. So I understand that's what we were trying to do in the past, and that's what we thought was going to happen. But we were mistaken, and there's no way to undo that mistake at this point. So we can only do it going forward and start adding to that. So that is really, it's a separate issue from what Jen is bringing to us tonight, but it is something that we should be looking at and trying to figure out.
So I was hoping that when we get to the item on the agenda with committee assignments, that we could initiate a discussion about the role of the long-range planning committee and the role it might have in dealing with ongoing funds coming into the library.
Okay, we can talk about that when we get there. Just remind me when we get there.
Okay.
All righty. Any other questions about this proposal that is before us right now? If not, would someone like to make the motion, as I stated, to approve the use of the annual fund appeal funds to fund a 12-month part-time position to coordinate the Be Well programs?
I make the motion.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome, Michelle.
Do I have a
Second.
second on that?
I will second that.
Thank you, Jocelyn. All right, by roll call, all those in favor of the use of the annual appeal funds for or against Mitch Cohen,
Mitch Cohen, aye.
Mary Crowley,
Mary Crowley, aye.
Jim Hogan,
Tim Hogan, aye.
Jocelyn McKelney,
Jocelyn McKelney, aye.
Beth Thomas,
Beth Thomas, aye.
Richard Tucker,
Richard Tucker, nay.
and I vote in favor as well. Motion carries in the affirmative with one negative vote. All right. Is there anything else in the library director's report that we want to discuss, mention? Because we sort of did that a little bit out of order. Yes, Mitch.
One, I wanted to thank Jen for her continued work making Hoopla better for not just our library, but libraries all over the country. Thank you very, very much. I know how much work that's been, but it sounds like they're making changes for the better that will make it easier for you and every library director that uses Hoopla to manage the collection.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. This is the first meeting since the new logo was announced. Mary, I saw an email that you sent out. I think I somewhat share your thoughts on it. I love the font, the color scheme. I'm not that big on the Nobo thing, but maybe I'm not in the demographic to understand what's new and cool. So I trust your judgment to do what is right by the library.
We had a lot of discussions among the management team about Nobo, which included me going through and because my initial reaction was, well, nobody uses that. Like, you can't give yourself a nickname. That's silly. But I went through and I was surprised to see that it's more common than I thought, and it's growing on me. But personally, I like the Northborough Free Library written out, the one that's in my email signature now. I like that one a little bit better, but Nobo is a much better solution for us than NFL.
True.
And we couldn't think of
what else could that mean?
Nothing.
You know what was funny is I said that to somebody and they were like, oh, right, because the Newton Free Library is also NFL. And I was like, yes, that's why.
We are. Thanks.
So, but we're stoked about the colors print really well.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm glad you like most of it.
Yeah,
Everybody
where
can
it's spelled out Northborough, north in the sort of the dark red and the borough in the green with the various fancy serifs on the letters with Free Library and everything. I really like that. That I think is very nice.
It took me longer than I'm willing to admit that the B was a book with a bookmark. I don't want to tell you how long I stared at that. My first reaction for the Nobo was that's going to look really great as an app or on a shirt.
Mhm.
And I feel like the longer I looked at it, the less I liked it. So I'm just going to go with my first reaction and thank everybody for their hard work. Because like you, I do like it spelled out because like you said, you can't give yourself a nickname.
Yeah.
But if we start using it, maybe it'll catch on.
He showed me, the graphic designer showed me the Nobo logo on a flyer. And that's kind of what sold me was like graphically, it looks really great. And she showed like here's a tote bag that you could, your friends could sell or whatever. And like, this is kind of what it would look like. And it looks really sharp graphically. I think
It's a nice conversation starter too. If people have no idea what it is, it prompts the, ooh, what's that question? And then can lead to a conversation.
yeah.
Right. This is specifically in the director's report, but I was looking at all of the reports from the departments, and it seems as if all of the summer reading programs are getting off to a really good start.
Oh, yeah.
Adult, teen, and children's.
Mhm.
So I'm happy that the librarians got to go back into the schools to talk to the school kids again.
I made them so happy.
Sure.
Grinning. And I hope you all saw the photo of Carly and Katrina.
Yes,
It
it was very amusing.
That's how they do their school visits.
That's the elephant. The elephant. It's the elephant Piggy.
Yep.
Love it. That was cool. I'm also happy to hear that the Algonquin Day of Service, the kids who went to the library, Bonnie was very excited about what they did.
Yep.
So glad to hear that went well. All right, anything else from the director's report? If not, we will move on to the, let me find my paper. The committee assignments. For the coming year, the subcommittees, administrative, Jocelyn and Beth, and a player to be named at a later date. Jocelyn, your name came first, so that makes you the chair of that subcommittee. Long range planning, Jim Hogan and Richard Tucker. Okay, I'll tell you one, I'll say something else after. And Jim and Richard and a player to be determined later. And building and grounds, Mitch Cohen, Mary Crowley, Michelle Rehill. So we will be that committee. I have the sheet of paper that includes all of the people who will be on the different committees, and with like a sentence or two about the responsibility of each committee, each subcommittee. And I can send that to you, Jen, if you want to post it in the trustee folder. So if anybody wants to access it, they can go in there and take a look at that. But Jim, I think you wanted to talk about, because one of the things for long range planning, one of the responsibilities that comes under that is the proposed uses of invested funds. So I'm assuming that that, Jim, is why you wanted to talk about making that part, sort of stressing it, or maybe being more formal about that subcommittee's role in terms of invested funds.
I guess what I'd like to do is to have a conversation between the committee, which would be Richard and myself, and you and Jen, and just talk about the mandate, because it doesn't seem like, as we're presently constructed, there's an awful lot for this committee to do. And yet, on the other hand, there could be, because some of the issues that Richard has raised and that we were talking about in the director's report could fall under the auspices of the LRP. So I'd just like to have a conversation about the role of the LRP and just get a little more structured sense of what it can do and what it cannot do, particularly in terms of, our relationship with the foundation. So that's all I wanted to get out there.
All right, if you want to schedule a meeting, I'm willing, Jen, if you're willing to meet with that subcommittee to talk about that and see if we could kind of hammer out some of those details.
It may be that we'll decide to do nothing, but it also may be that we'll decide to do something. But I think it's worth talking about. So if it's okay with you guys, I'll take it upon myself to try and set up a time when we can meet. And I think at this point in time, we probably could meet in person.
I think after Friday, is it Friday this week? I think the remote meeting authorization is ending. So I think you'll have to meet in person after.
Oh, excellent.
It will, everyone in the legislature seems to think it will get renewed again, but the House and the Senate are just fighting over the form under which that will take place. So doesn't look like the renewal will take place before Friday, but in all likelihood, remote meetings will be allowed at least until next March, if not next December of 2023, if not forever, depending upon who you ask. I think eventually it will be forever.
But if you guys are willing, I mean, I think at this point, we probably could meet together in a small group in the library, you know, and if that's okay with all of you.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can set up a date. And
Sounds good.
Okay. Sounds good.
I also have to bring Richard back his book that I owe him, Four Fishes.
What was the book?
Yeah, the fishing book.
Oh, yeah, the fishes, Four Fishes.
It's a great book.
It is a great book, isn't it? It's got a great title too, right?
It's a great book.
Terrific.
I've had it so long now. I read it initially, and I've actually reread portions of it. It's a really good read.
You know that fishing could be so riveting. Oh, wait, I have friends who are Confederate fishermen. Please don't tell them I said that. You never heard me say those words.
Meeting is recorded.
Not helping Jen.
Is that what I'm supposed to do?
All right. Is there any, oops, I have to make a note to myself or I will forget. All righty. Are there any other issues that anybody would like to bring up before the board tonight? Anything else for discussion? Any
So I have
comments?
one question, the subcommittees that have players to be named later, can we still meet as a subcommittee before our players to be named are named? Or do we have to
Yes.
wait? Oh,
No, you may do it, as long as there were two of you. That constitutes a quorum for your subcommittee. So you may get
that-
started whenever you would like.
And those follow the rules about public posting and the 48, okay.
Correct. Yeah, you'll see that. I put that as a note on the list. They have all the committees, who's on it,
Okay.
responsibilities, and a little note that says, remember, subject to open meeting laws. And postage.
I'm happy, Jocelyn, to take care of the posting and all that kind of stuff with the town. And I've got some work for your subcommittee, so whenever you want to start meeting, that's fine.
I'm coming back with work that I never finished when I was here 2 years ago. So trust me, I have a list.
It's gonna hit the ground running.
I think in fact, part of my interview was I have unfinished business.
Yes, actually, that was in there. All right, if there's nothing else, the next meeting will be September 13th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And we will wait to hear from the legislature to decide if it will be in person or remote. If they give us the green light to continue remote meetings, are we agreed that they will continue remotely for the time being? In general?
In general.
In general, okay. All righty, so the next meeting will be, again, September 13th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Location to be determined. And if there is no other business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Fine, Beth, new person has to do the motion.
Yeah, come on, Beth, it's you.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Richard. All right, all those in favor of adjourning the meeting, Mitch Cohen,
Mitch Cohen, aye.
Mary Crowley,
Aye.
Jim Hogan,
Jim Hogan, aye.
Jocelyn McKelney,
Jocelyn McKelney, aye.
Beth Samus,
Beth Samus, aye.
Richard Tucker.
Tucker, aye.
Michelle Wehill also says aye. The meeting is adjourned at 7:45 PM. Good night, everyone, including Kate.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Night.
Good night.